On this episode of The Word Made Fresh, we're going to talk about evangelism. But first, we're going to talk about trees. I'm Reverend Jim Keat, the digital minister at the Riverside Church, and this is The Word Made Fresh, the weekly video Bible study and sermon prep resource where we take a look at one of the upcoming lectionary passages and then talk about it here, and then you comment about it there, and then you share it with everybody. You know, you do that, right? You should really hit the share button and share it. Because today we're going to talk about trees, then we're going to talk about the lectionary text. It's from Acts, and all of this is going to lead us to talking about evangelism. Now you might already be thinking, evangelism? Jim, I thought you were some progressive liberal Christian. You're going to talk about Yes, I'm going to talk about evangelism, because I think we should talk about it too. It's a good thing. I mean, literally good word. It's good news. Okay, let's get to that in a second. First, trees. So trees can come in handy for lots of things because, you know, you can climb on them, you can hang a swing from them, you can sit under their shade when it's really hot out, and eventually sometimes the trees, you know, they live their lifespan and then we can use them for other purposes. Like, I'm thinking specifically if you're cold, you can build a fire to stay warm. Let's be honest, bonfires are probably one of the greatest inventions ever. Are they an invention? Does that count as an invention? I don't know. So trees serve a function to bring good news. You see where I'm going with evangelism? They bring good news based on the needs you have. When you're hot, they bring shade. When you're cold, they bring warmth. They provide shelter. They provide entertainment and pleasure. And suddenly this becomes a fort. Like, look, we got, you know, this entrance over here, bridge to Terabithia over there, and that's just the parts of the tree that we can see and kind of use like that. Then there's the whole like part of the tree that's under the tree. Under the sea. It's one thing to have this part, the trunk, the bark, the wood, all that, but then there's the roots. There's you see it? Look at that. That's just the part of the roots we can see. Roots keep going. They're deep if the ground is deep, they're shallow if the ground is shallow, and what we found is that the roots from one tree, they end up spreading out and they end up connecting to the roots of another tree and another tree. And if there's like some sort of an insect infestation happening, the trees will actually communicate with one another to send the appropriate nutrients or repellents through this root system to make sure that they can all be safe and supported. There is so much going on underground to make what we see possible. By the way, there's a great episode of Radiolab all about this. I'll leave a link down below. Here's one of my favorite clips.
All these trees that were of totally different species were sharing their food underground. Like if you put a food into one tree over here, it would end up in another tree maybe 30 feet away over there, and then a third tree over here, and then a fourth tree over there, and a fifth tree over there, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. All in all, it turns out one tree was connected to 47 other trees all around it. It was like a huge network.
Yeah, you should listen to that to really geek out about trees. Look at this tree, it's very pretty. So that's a little bit about trees. Nothing scientifically mind-blowing, but just trust me, we need to start with trees in order to get to evangelism. But first, let's look at this Sunday's lectionary text. We're looking at Acts. This text is Paul in the city of Athens talking to a group of people at a place called the Areopagus, which is kind of a philosophical center for debate and discussion and learning. This whole passage is just Paul talking. So we don't really get the full story. We don't really understand how he got there. We don't know what happened next. But I think there's a couple things that we can really dissect from this that will help us connect trees and evangelism. I hope. We'll find out. Here's what it says. Then Paul stood in front of the Areopagus and said, "Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription, 'To an unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, he who is the Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mortals life and breath and all things." Sorry about all the male pronouns for God. I'm just literally reading it off the page. Page? Screen? What do you say we switch it up to feminine pronouns for God for the rest of this video, just to, keep things fair and balanced. From one ancestor she made all nations to inhabit the whole earth, and she allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God and perhaps grope for her and find her, though indeed she is not far from each of us. For in her we live and move and have our being. As even some of your own poets have said, for we too are God's offspring. That's Paul quoting the Athenians' poets listed in Scripture. I always love the whole, every word is inerrant and inspired. Well, that means suddenly the Athenians' poets are inspired. Since we are God's offspring, we ought not to think that the deity is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. While God has overlooked the times of human ignorance, now she commands all people everywhere to repent, because she has fixed a day on which she will have the world judged in righteousness by a man whom she has appointed, and of this she has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. So this is Paul talking to the people of Athens at the Areopagus, and there's a lot of things going on here, and I want us to really focus on a couple of them specifically so we can connect trees to evangelism. Now, you might be thinking, hold on, let's go over here. There's some people coming through to play disc golf, and I might get hit with a golf disc. That would not be good. Well, that'd be maybe a good video, but it would not be good for my brain. Over here. This is an interesting section because you might just think, okay, this is a sermon from Paul. He lands it in Jesus, typical evangelism message, right? Kind of. I think there's a couple unique things going on that'll help us really make all these connections I'm trying to help us make to talk about evangelism and this text and trees. First, Paul's message is very contextual. I mean, he starts by saying, I went around your city, I see you're very religious, I even found this altar you have to the unknown God, I even know you're poets enough to quote them. Paul's message of good news is contextual to the people he's talking to. This is because good news has to be contextual. In order for good news to be good news, it has to be contextually good in the space in which it's being offered or embodied or proclaimed. And so in this case, Paul, talking to the people in Athens, the things he says are contextual to what's happening in their space. Now, this kind of connects back to trees because trees provide goodness contextually. When you're hot, they provide shade that's cold. When you're cold, they can become firewood that's warm. Just don't cut down a living tree. Use the fallen branches. When you're bored, they can be a place to play. And they're as contextual as possible because they're literally planted in one place. They literally exist here in a certain context. So you got to start by being where you are, like a tree, like Paul. So Paul's message is good news in this context because he's saying, I see you worship lots of gods and you have this unknown God. Let me help you know the unknown God. There's this guy Jesus, and in Jesus we see God revealed in an entirely new way. Paul's message of good news is contextual in this space. He's not just giving answers to questions nobody's asking. He's offering good news that meets a need, solves a problem, is contextually good here. We'll talk a little bit more about good news and evangelism in a second, but first let's talk about roots. Tree roots, that is. You might see the tree, but the roots are what make it possible. This, I think, is the same for Paul. Paul didn't just read the first random Athenian poet he could find and say, ooh, let me work that into my sermon. Paul rooted himself in the space around him, the context, the culture, the people around him, so that when he spoke to offer good news, it was contextually rooted in that space. Paul didn't just read the first Athenian poet he could find and work it into his sermon. He rooted himself in this context, not so that, yes, the message of good news he brings is actually good in this place, but that it comes from a place where it can actually grow into something. He's not just, dropping a quick, oh, that seems relevant for the sake of being relevant. Let me talk about TikTok in a sermon because suddenly now all the kids will listen. It's not how it works. Paul is being contextually rooted in an environment so that his good news is contextually good for them as well, so that it's authentic from who he is in the place he is, and the news is actually good. Because you see, evangelism, it means proclaiming the good news. It's you're saying that which is good. And too often I think evangelism becomes giving the answers to the questions nobody's asking. Or, hold on, let me put my camera down. So I wanted to talk about evangelism in this video, both because I think it makes sense because of the lectionary passage. That's what Paul is doing. He's spreading the good news. And also because from the kind of liberal, mainline, progressive theological point of view, we avoid this E word. We rather leave it to the evangelicals and let them go, colonize the internet to save souls for a spaceship called heaven. But no, I think we need to push pause on that and say, what does this word mean, and how does someone from a progressive liberal mainline point of view even engage it? So here's a couple final thoughts to kind of hopefully land all this, and then you can just chime in below in the comments. First, often evangelism, like I've been saying, becomes answers to questions nobody's asking. Or we think the good news we're offering is how to get to heaven instead of hell, when people are just interested in how do I get out of the hell on the earth around me. And maybe we should be more interested in how do we bring heaven to the earth around us too. I think that's in the Bible like everywhere. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Not just someday when I go to heaven. Okay, good to know. So when progressives, mainlines, liberals, whatever you want to call this kind of camp of thought that I'm a part of, you're probably a part of, we often think that, the good news we're bringing is social justice to the people around us. And I think we should think of that as good news. Proclaiming freedom for the captives and sight for the blind. I mean, that's contextual good news. That's actually good for the people who encounter it. Why would the message of Jesus ever stop being such? Why does it become a disembodied, someday I'll go on a spaceship called heaven, beam me up, Scotty kind of a message? No, I think we should reclaim the word evangelism, but recognize that we embody good news in the way we live in the world around us by bringing heaven to earth and squelching the flames of hell that are raging in too many places on this planet. That's evangelism. So evangelism happens in the words you say. Yeah, you should tell people about this God that you've encountered, this Jesus that you follow, the way that inspires you. That's what we see Paul doing. But what we also need is the rest of the story. We need the actions to back up those words. We need the walk that backs up the talk. This means when you make an environmentally conscious decision, that's evangelism because you're proclaiming the good news. When you get to know your neighbors, especially now when we're all kind of, leaning over balconies to see the people around us, when we're keeping our 6-foot distance from everyone, get to know your neighbors, and that's a way of proclaiming the good news by being the incarnational presence of a God who says, I am here with you. God has hands, by the way. They're attached to your wrists. So, should we tell people about Jesus? Yes, but I like the quote that St. Francis probably never said, but we attribute to him anyway. Preach the good news by any means necessary, and if you really have to, you can even use words. Because like a tree, we need to be contextual. The good news has to actually be good for the people that we're proclaiming and embodying it to. If all we're doing is telling people how to get to a place called heaven and avoid a place called hell, well, we're not offering anything good for the world right now or for our lives right now. Good news shouldn't just be good for someday, but good for now. It needs to be the shade on the hot day, and the tree house when you're bored, and the campfire when you're cold. And second, it needs to be rooted. When you offer good news, it's not drive-by evangelism, just waving at a stranger. That's good news, but get to know your neighbor. It's not just, cool, I recycled today. build a culture of recycling in your life and in your family so that good news is just rooted in who you are, and your good news is rooted in the context around you. Okay, there's a couple thoughts on trees and evangelism with Acts 17 in between. What do you think? What does it mean to evangelize now, today? What does evangelism mean to you? What do you think of that word? Whoa, my camera's about to tip over. And I'm gonna go climb a tree or something. No, I'm just gonna fly a drone over a tree. See you next time.